of last minute technical stuff. Okie dokie. Okay. All right, everyone. We're live, I think. So let's make a start. So I'm just going to leave it for a little bit, like I usually do when I go live, just to give people who want to join us time to join us, and just to make sure that everything is working the way it should. So if you're here, give me a wave, say hello. It's I'm really excited to be streaming this tonight. So today was the very first was the cover reveal for Run Like Clockwork Vol. II, and I've been sitting on this cover for so long. I originally made it back at the beginning of the year. I did it in conjunction with Run Like Clockwork Vol. I, and I did that on purpose because now that the two covers have been revealed, you'll actually be able to see that if you line them up, put them next to each other, they actually can make sort of a complete image. The clock face, which is on both covers, makes a complete clock face. And there are so many layers in that cover, and literally, not just figuratively, but literally, I think I nearly blew my Photoshop when I was making that. If you see me glancing down here, it's just because I've got my phone in front of me right here with the ring light. I've also got my Chromebook down here, and that will just allow me to keep a bit of a closer eye on the comments as and if and when they come through. So yeah, I am just going to be glancing down here every now and then just to make sure that everything is still working the way that it should do. So yeah, I really just, I can't believe it's nearly time. 6 months has flown. I deliberately wanted to release these novels 6 months apart and on the 12th day of each month. Reason being, again, it's all sort of, it's very symbolic with the book. So we've got the 12th day because we've got 12 numerals on a clock face, and 6 because the novel itself, the story itself, is essentially just one giant story that I had no choice but to split into 2 volumes. So half and half the year apart. It just seemed very apt for me to do it that way. But even so, 6 months has flown by. It barely feels like yesterday that I was doing all this drum roll stuff for volume 1. And then I know I left it on a heck of a cliffhanger, the first book. And book 2 essentially picks up exactly where book 1 left off, literally the very same night. So a lot of stuff happens in volume 2. It is... I think a lot of people are going to be quite surprised at some of the stuff that happens. I'd like to think you will be. But it's a very twisty-turny book, and it's maybe not exactly what you might be expecting in some respects. Okay, guys, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to not upset my entire system. And I noticed that the ring light just flickered there a little bit. So I'm going to now make a start on reading Run Like Clockwork Volume 2. So basically, the way that this works, I'm just going to explain this for a moment. If you guys haven't read Volume 1, then it's all right. There is a fair bit that happens in Volume 1, I beg your pardon, in Chapter 1, which will still make sense. It's absolutely fine. But basically, because, as I mentioned, Part 1, Volume 1, is only one half of a whole, what I'm actually doing here is, instead of starting it with Chapter 1, it's actually called Chapter 31, because we're going on exactly from where we left off. It's just one massive story that just happens to be in 2 books. So to reflect that, this is actually called Chapter 31, but for ease, I'm going to refer to it as Chapter 1. So, Chapter 1 of Run Like Clockwork Volume 2, The Eternal Heart, and I am reading this for the very first time ever in its entirety. I really hope you guys will enjoy it. Across the city of Forest, people stared out of windows and wandered into the streets. Worried mutterings rumbled through the frigid air. Beneath it, there was only silence. The tower had stopped, and with it, so had the other power systems. Giant lighting mechanisms ground to a halt and plunged homes into darkness. Nothing like this had ever happened before. On Fenwick Street, in the 8th North Quarter, a manhole cover slid back, and Melissa Spector climbed out. She thrust it back into position with her foot, then ran. Nobody paid any attention. They were all too shocked, pointing up at the tower, and Melissa darted between them like a shadow. They didn't know what had happened, but she did. The timekeeper had escaped, but how? They were bound to the central mechanism by invisible chains, as strong as time itself. Keepers were machines with human parts, that was all. No free will left in them. Melissa pushed the thoughts from her head. She needed to focus. She was a master assassin, but she had also performed her share of investigations, and in all cases, the key was logic. Luckily, that was how the Keeper also functioned. There was no room for emotion of any kind. And Melissa's gut told her that when she found Charlotte Bellamy, she would also find clues to where he was. She rounded the final corner. There, at the end of the street, was the old sanctuary house. Her team of officers had cordoned it off with lengths of rope and torn the metal board from the front door. Melissa went straight towards Richie Irving. "Well?" she asked. "They're gone," he replied ruefully. "But they were here. We didn't go in. We thought it best to wait for you." Melissa took a clockwork torch from her belt, wound it to full capacity, and stepped into the building. At once she noticed scuffed footprints in the dust. She followed them upstairs to August Bellamy's office and found broken cobwebs and discarded sheets. "They must have left in a hurry," she said. "They would have tidied up after themselves otherwise. Tried to mask the trail." "Well, shouldn't we go after them, madam?" Yellen asked. "How can we do that when we don't know where they went?" Melissa said. "Look everywhere. They either knew we were coming or found something to direct them." The officers immediately sprang into action. While they inspected the other rooms, Melissa sniffed the air. It was faint, but she caught the sharp scent of hot metal. At first, she thought it was the lighting mechanism, so she checked the bulb, but all she smelled was more dust. She turned to the desk, glanced at the leg space. The dust was disturbed there too, but not from footprints. It looked as though somebody had crawled underneath it. She bent down and noticed a locking mechanism with a tiny orb at the center. She almost dropped her torch. "Fletcher!" she called. "Go back to the roots and bring me Victor Paley, now!" Melissa shuffled further under the desk so she could see the gears better. Alchemy had never been her strong suit, but she knew enough to recognize an infinity incision in the orb. Solder ran across it like veins, pinning it in place. Awe and dread twisted her insides into a hard knot. Charlotte Bellamy had done this. Melissa had witnessed her do it before, in her bedroom, when she thought nobody could see. But now it was out here, in use. Exactly what Melissa had dreaded. She growled under her breath. If only Daniel had given her orders to kill the troublesome girl in the first place. After several minutes, Fletcher returned with Paley. Years bent over books and orbs and the roots hadn't done any favors for his appearance. He walked with his shoulders drawn up, so it was difficult to see where his neck began, and his hair flowed from his liver-spotted head like spiderwebs. But his eyes gleamed with intelligence, as sharp and keen as icicles in the depths of winter. "Madam Spector," he said, "to what do I owe this rather late honor?" "A matter of urgency, Professor," Melissa said. She glanced at her officers. "All of you wait outside and shut the door." They immediately did as she ordered. Melissa aimed her torch at the gears. "Take a look down there." Billy's joints clicked as he eased himself onto his hands and knees. Then his mouth dropped open. "Who did this?" he gasped. "That doesn't matter," Melissa said. "Can you tell me exactly what is happening here?" Paley drew a loop out of his pocket and pressed it to his eye to inspect the orb. He shook his head in wonder. "It's spectacular," he said. "It isn't just alchemy. It's advanced watch mechanics, fused with the core of an orb permanently. This procedure has created a self-contained mechanism, able to exist completely under its own power." Melissa's heart slammed against her ribs. "How long will it run for?" she asked. "Forever?" No, said Paley. "This isn't a high-grade orb. In ordinary circumstances, I'd expect 30 years out of it, maximum. But with this procedure, over 100, maybe even 200. And it's all been done with common watch solder. Unbelievable." He took hold of the desk and used it to haul himself to his feet. "This could be revolutionary," he said. "It's deceptively simple. Damn, I would even say it's obvious, now I've seen it with my own eyes." "If it's so simple, then why are you so stunned?" Melissa asked bluntly. "Are you telling me that watch solder has never been used on an orb like this before?" "No. Remember, Madam Spectre, aside from placing orbs into the machines that need them, alchemy and watch mechanics don't mix. The normal background for an alchemist will be biology, chemistry, medicine, disciplines of that caliber, not clock tinkering. But if this was taken to the next level, the Keeper becomes obsolete, the invisible law crumbles, and the potentate system is overthrown," Melissa finished. She fixed Paley with a stare as sharp as a scalpel. "Professor, this is of the highest confidentiality. Not even your fellow Eternum alchemists are to know. Do you understand me?" "Absolutely," Paley said, and kissed the ruby ring on his finger. "You may not wish to disclose who did this, but they're no alchemist I know. Nothing like this is taught in my line of study. This is the work of someone from the lower trades who has learnt from the ground up, outside our circles." He drew closer to Melissa. "With respect, it seems that in keeping such control over the free alchemists, you may have forgotten to watch the commoners." Melissa gave him a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We watch everyone, and that is all you need to know." Knowing better than to push her further, Paley inclined his head. "Is there anything else you require me for?" "No," Melissa said. "You may return to the roots." "Before I do," Paley said, "might I please ask what's happened up there?" Melissa gritted her teeth. "You have your keys. I imagined you'd have investigated yourself." Paley's eyes flashed. "I'd hate to stumble onto something I didn't need to know." It took all of Melissa's self-control to not react. Paley was the head of the Eternum's alchemist faction. To keep the power symbolically equal between them and the potentate, he and Daniel were the only ones authorized to access the tower. Not even she, the chief officer of the constabulary, was able to enter it. And Paley knew that. He thought himself so much better than her. She could see it in the tiny smirk at the corner of his mouth. If he'd been anyone else, Melissa would have put him in his place long ago. "Well," he pressed, "what of the Keeper?" "He seems to have gone wandering," Melissa said eventually. "That is worrying," Paley muttered. "Is that why you're out here, looking for him?" "In a manner of speaking." "I hope you find him soon. The heating mechanisms in the roots have started to wind down, so now it's freezing in there, as well as dark." "This won't last for long," Melissa said. "I will find him." Paley nodded slowly. "I've no doubt, Madam Spectre. Though I strongly suggest that when you have found him, the potentate proceeds with all haste. The sooner the malady is passed on to a new child, the sooner you can wash your hands of this. And I encourage young Nicholas to witness the transfer." "Why is that?" "The boy is so sheltered, cooped up in the pavilion all the time. But he'll be potentate someday. He must learn the truth now, lest it harm him later. If a parent needed to tell you such a life-changing secret, wouldn't you rather they be straight with you from the beginning?" Melissa pursed her lips. Paley had a point. She smiled again, thinly, like sheer fabric stretched over a hole. I'll pass your concerns on to the potentate, she said, then opened the door and held it wide. Fletcher, will you escort the professor back to the antechamber? His assistance has been most enlightening. Paley bowed his head, but kept his eyes on her. Melissa caught a flash of mockery in his face before he followed Fletcher down the stairs. But she didn't pay attention. He wasn't important. She had what she needed from him, and that was all. Never mind that he could go up the tower if he wanted. He was so ancient, he couldn't even manage a single flight of stairs without clinging to the banister. Melissa returned to the mechanism, prodded around it until something clicked, and tore open the desk drawers until she found a hidden compartment. The glow of her torch hit something, gold and red, a ruby eternum ring, just like the one she herself wore. "Oh, Hargreaves," she murmured, "you stupid, stupid boy." Phoebe Feline stood by an open grave, her eyes cast down in stoic forbearance. The sun had barely risen, and a faint icy drizzle clung to her fur. On any other occasion, the cold might have put her in a foul mood, but now she couldn't have cared less. Once again, she was burying a friend, another born after her and dead before her, and this time it was one she was certain she could have saved. In the early days of Forest, it didn't take long to conduct a funeral. Phoebe could remember it as easily as if it were yesterday. Back then, the dead were buried as soon as possible. Things had since changed. Refrigeration had been invented, so they could remain on ice for as long as necessary. But as usual, the humans took precedence, and the lunar fauna lagged behind. There was only a single refrigeration unit in Fauna Town, and if it was already in use, nothing could be done for anyone else. That thought lingered bitterly in Phoebe's mind as she watched Evelyn's shrouded body sinking into the earth. Her friend hadn't even been dead for a week. If she was a human, a no-tail, it would never have been so hurried, so easy to finish and forget about. How much would Evelyn's face have collapsed by now? Phoebe had seen enough corpses to know the eyes went first. There was an old story, told to kittens and puppies, to make them feel better about death. The reason why the eyes turned milky was because the person had transformed one final time, but outside their body, and became moonlight, one with the ancient magic. White eyes were the sign that they were free. Phoebe's ear twitched as two people approached. Bridget Dickinson and her nephew Julian. They were the only others who had come, the only humans still living who Phoebe respected. They stood at Phoebe's side. Both were dressed smartly, in dark clothes and long coats. Bridget had powdered her hair so much it looked completely grey. Phoebe held her breath so she wouldn't sneeze. It was a stupid fashion, but she didn't have the heart for sarcastic remarks. Not today. "Will Miss Gilbert be safe here?" Julian asked quietly. Phoebe knew at once what he meant. "Why do you think it's an individual grave?" she replied. "I paid more for this than what I have to give to Daniel every year. I'm not leaving her in a trench. Lunar fauna bodies always disappear before human ones." Bridget laid a hand on her shoulder. Phoebe did look at her then, and the heavy, terrible knowledge hung between them like gas. "Thank you for doing that," Bridget said. "I'd do it for everyone if I could." "I know, but you do your best. That's all anyone can ask for." "It's not enough." Phoebe scratched her neck. Beneath her black shawl, the collar pressed against her fur. Its hidden needle dug into her scruff and wove a horrid noose of magic around her vocal cords. She couldn't have spoken any more about that matter, even if she had wanted to. She picked up some soil. It reminded her more of ash than earth, completely dead. With a sigh, she scattered it over Evelyn and closed her eyes in the feline gesture of loyalty. "Cover her completely," Phoebe said to the gravedigger. "If I come back and she's been disturbed, there will be blood." The gravedigger sneered. I know how to do my job, pussycat. Then make sure you do it, Phoebe snapped. She turned to Bridget. Thank you for coming. Evie would be happy you did. Her heart flipped. How could she, who always survived, know what might make the dead happy? Bridget grasped her paw. Phoebe, why don't you come to my house for a while? No, I should stay in Faunatown in case anyone needs me. Phoebe threw a glance at the tower. Even from out here, she could see the clock face. Its hands still read 5 minutes to 12. They hadn't moved in almost 9 hours. What do you think has happened? Bridget whispered. None of my lights were working this morning. Has the keeper died? Julian asked. Phoebe shook her head and winced as the needle twitched. If only it was possible to cut the collar off. It was the most awful thing any lunar fauna could wear, let alone their leader. It kept her from talking, prevented her from taking her cat form. It was the closest thing to a shackle there could be. And if Melissa Spector, the vixen, had her way, Phoebe would probably end up wearing it for a whole lifetime. Her tail drooped. 12 years without shifting had been torturous enough. Could she really endure another 80? Yes. There was no choice. There never had been. He's not dead, she said tightly, but they'll have to fix the tower soon, otherwise Daniel will have riots on his hands. Well, more riots. I just hope there won't be any today, said Bridget. Phoebe, if you won't come to my house, why don't we go with you? I've got nothing else to do. Maybe we can help in Faunatown. Phoebe grimaced. Faunatown isn't exactly the prettiest place at the moment. That doesn't matter, Bridget replied. I don't think it's good for you to be alone right now. Let us come. Phoebe sighed and finally gave in. All right, thank you. She pressed her forehead against Bridget's. The gravedigger muttered disapprovingly, but Phoebe ignored him. That little scoff was nothing compared to all of the blows she had endured. Why do you do that? Julian asked. I've seen it before, but why? Phoebe glanced at him. It moves scents between people. Smells are important for lunar fauna. No two are the same. If someone shares theirs, it shows friendship and trust, like being as one breath. She spoke loud enough for the gravedigger to hear. He grumbled again, then thrust his shovel into the earth and began filling the hole. Phoebe turned away so she couldn't watch. She trudged back to the 12th level wall, Bridget and Julian in tow, and they took a cab to the 5th south. By the time they arrived, the sun had climbed higher and burned away the rain, and still the tower didn't chime. Anxiety dropped through Phoebe's chest like a stone. There could only be one reason, but if it was that easy for the keeper to run away, it would have been done before. She was the only one who had been around for longer than the tower. She knew how intelligent keepers were, by design. But unlike her, their humanity never lasted. It was part of the sacrifice to be able to run the entire city. They might be able to think for themselves to some degree, but to willingly leave the chamber? Something else had to be going on. Phoebe's skin crawled to not know what it was, like a million fleas had found their way into her fur. She had thought nothing could surprise her now, and she had been wrong. The carriage reached Faunatown. When they stepped outside, Bridget's eyes widened in alarm. Above the musty scents of canines and felines, a fog of despair hung over every street and building. Loose roof tiles lay shattered where they had fallen. Dirty water pooled around clogged drains. A battered metal door swung back and forth in the wind, creaking like a wounded creature. Phoebe wanted to curl inwards with embarrassment. This was her part of the city. She did the best she could, but that stood for little when nobody else cared. Bridget drew close to a graffiti-caked wall. What does it say? Asked Julian. When we bleed the same, Phoebe answered in a quiet voice. I'm surprised it's still there. Coppers usually paint over them straight away. but I suppose they have other issues to deal with at the moment. Phoebe led Bridget and Julian along the road. The deeper they went, the more the panic grew. Phoebe's whiskers twitched. She sensed it in the breeze like a change in temperature. Anxious lunar fauna thronged the doorways in packs. They glanced up at the sight of the humans, but Phoebe shook her tail and gave a slow blink to show her companions could be trusted. She turned a corner into one of the main thoroughfares. Smashed placards littered the pavements. In places, faded bloodstains were visible against the bricks. "What happened here?" Julian gasped. Phoebe frowned. "You didn't hear? There was another protest. Lunar fauna and alchemists. I suppose they're trying to hush it all up. Again." She shuddered at the memory. It had started peacefully, with a plan to march through the levels to the second south, but the constabulary had somehow gotten rid of it. Youngsters were wrenched from their mothers, scruffs grabbed, and tails pulled so hard they broke. Those who fought back had been arrested. Phoebe tried to protect them, but the human officers pushed her to the ground as though she were nothing. And then, less than 12 hours later, she had to put on her awful frilly dress and bow down to Daniel at the parliamentary moot. But she had lived long enough to sense something else in the air. Something deeper than the plight which had always trapped her people. It was an invisible thread, stretching tighter and tighter, straining under itself. Soon it would snap. Either the lunar fauna would break out of their cage, or the potentate would crush them. And somehow, despite her own pain and exhaustion, Phoebe needed to be ready for it. A group spotted her and hurried down the road, some on 2 legs and others on 4. "Phoebe, what's going on? All the power's gone. Why is the tower stopped? Who are those no-tails?" "Friends of mine," replied Phoebe, as calmly as she could. "I'm sure they're working to get the tower fixed. Do you all have food, blankets?" "Yeah, but the water's not working either," cried one of the canines. Phoebe glanced around. There was nothing in the vicinity, save for a single huge lighting mechanism. Its giant gears juddered as they turned. Soon, it too would cease running. Then she had an idea. "The well pumps. They should still be active. Go to Brunswick Square, fill a pail per person, and try to make it last." "I can help," Julian volunteered. Would that be all right?" "We both will," Bridget said. The gathered lunar fauna regarded them cagily, so Phoebe stepped forward and rubbed her tail against Julian's arm. "See? I trust them. You can too," she said. "Bridget, I'll make sure the other squares are secure. When you're done, head back to my house." "Is it the same everywhere else, or is it just here?" a tabby feline asked. "I bet the no-tails turned it off on purpose." "It's not just here," Phoebe replied. "This is why we need the magic power sources," another canine insisted. "Maybe it will make them see sense. We shouldn't have everything connected to the tower." "I wouldn't count on it. When have humans ever thought the sun and moon are good for anything?" "Please, everyone, stay calm," Phoebe said loudly. "It's going to be all right. Anybody you see, tell them what I've told you, then go home and stay warm. I'll let the whole district know as soon as I hear any news." The lunar fauna all purred and yipped in respect, then hurried away. Bridget and Julian followed at a brisk walk. Within minutes, Phoebe was alone. She stood still. Finally, with no one to see her, she drew a deep breath. It trembled as it entered her lungs. She could let her people see her drunk and moody, but when they needed her to be strong, she would never fail them. A loud grinding noise split the air. Phoebe spun around, just as the lighting mechanism broke out of its frame. Gears clattered onto the road and bounced in all directions. She went to run, but then noticed a little urchin puppy cowering near the wall. Phoebe leapt towards him and shielded him with her body. The puppy pressed himself against her belly, tail tucked between his legs. "What's going on?" he cried. Make it stop, please!" Phoebe held him until the gears had all rolled. "Stop, please!" Phoebe held him until the gears had all rolled away. She bent down and checked him for injuries, but to her relief, found none. "Where are your parents?" she asked. His ears drooped. Haven't got any. Phoebe's heart sank. She pulled a couple of solidy notes from her purse and shoved them into his paw. All right, listen, she said. Go to the 3 cogwheels, tell Timmy I sent you, and ask him to give you a bite to eat. The puppy stared up at Phoebe with huge, frightened eyes. Thank you, Lady Feline, he muttered. Are you sure? Go on before you freeze, Phoebe urged. The puppy licked her cheek, then darted down an alley. Phoebe scrubbed her face with a paw. She knew he meant well, but she hated anyone touching her whiskers. She walked away. Whenever she came across anyone, she did her best to reassure them. She repeated herself so much, her own words rang in her ears. If there was no change by midday, she decided, she would march up to the pavilion and demand to see Daniel. 12 hours was more than enough for him to figure out what was going on. Phoebe reached her house and slipped through the door. At once she puffed up her fur. Her heating had failed too. If the keeper was going to go rogue, why couldn't it have been in the middle of summer? Then she paused, ears turning toward the parlour. Someone was in there. She swept her tail angrily. Come to pay me another visit, Vixen? You'd better be here with an explanation. But it wasn't Melissa Spector who stepped into the hallway. Instead, 3 men appeared. No, 2 men. The third was a girl in disguise. Lady Feline, said the one in the long coat. I'm sorry for the intrusion. We need to speak with you. So you broke into my house? You do realise I have a doorbell? We were desperate. It's important. Phoebe sniffed at him. He was tall, with coal-black hair, and his eyes were 2 different colours, one brown, one blue. You seem familiar. Have you pissed me off before? The man cleared his throat. No, but you've seen me in the Roots. Constable Oscar Hargreaves. Forgive me, but I invoke the potentate's decree of sanctuary. Ah, Phoebe said coolly. And what about you 2? The girl pulled off her cap. She opened her mouth to speak, but Phoebe held up a paw. At once, she knew who it was. She hadn't seen Charlotte Bellamy for years, but it was like August was standing there, looking out of her eyes. Okay, Bassies, so there we have the very first reading of the first chapter of Run Like Clockwork Volume 2, The Eternal Heart. So I really hope you guys enjoyed that. It's been such a roller coaster ride to bring this story to you guys. So, okay, so finally, just to let you guys know exactly what is going to happen next. The cover has been revealed today. Yay! And it has been revealed exactly 1 month before the official release date. So the book itself, will Run Like Clockwork Volume 2, will be coming out on Wednesday, the 12th of October. Now, the pre-order is already up and running, so if you go to my website, the links will all be down in the description below and across all of my social media. Go to the page on the website specifically for Volume 2, and you will be able to pre-order it. You can either pre-order it in ebook via Amazon, and if in that case your ebook will be sent to you immediately at midnight Pacific time on the day of the release and be sent to your reading device. Alternatively, you can also pre-order a back copy, which is done privately through me, and that means that you won't get the paperback for a couple of weeks after the release date, purely because I need to wait for the stock to reach me before I can then send it out to you. But the paperbacks, if you pre-order them, will be signed and personalised to you with your name in the front, and you'll also receive a free Run Like Clockwork bookmark. They're the first of their kind that I've created, and it has the 2 covers next to each other for the very first time. Now, in regards to the release itself, on the 12th of October, there will be a couple of things happening to mark the release date. Stay tuned for more information on that. I will give you guys updates as I know them. And then a little bit later, a couple of weeks later, on the 5th of November, I am going to be having a soft launch, physical launch for the book in Chester at the amazing Susie K at the Secret Garden. That is open to everybody. So if you're in the Northwest area, in the Chester area, come down to meet me. Mark your calendars, the 5th of November at 12 o'clock till 4 o'clock, and I will be at the Secret Garden signing copies of Run Like Clockwork Volume 2, also Volume 1, and all of my other books are also in stock at the shop as well. So even if you come and you want the Winter Spirits, for example, or Blindsided Wanderer, you will be able to get them there. It is the only shop in the world which has all of my novels, all of my books in paperback for you to purchase straight off the shelves. So that is not to be missed. With that being said, everyone, I want to thank you for tuning in tonight to listen to the very first chapter of Run Like Clockwork. If you are intrigued by what you have heard, head on over to my website and pre-order your copy. Check out Volume 1 if you haven't already. All of the links are there. I really hope that you enjoyed hearing the snippet for the first time. Thank you again for joining me tonight, and I will see you guys very soon. So take care. Mwah. Bye.